It was a cold evening when I first noticed the necklace around my daughter's neck. The lights in the living room flickered softly, reflecting off the small, heart-shaped pendant that rested just above her collarbone. For a moment, I thought my eyes were deceiving me. I leaned closer, squinting through the warm blur of the lamp's glow. But no, the design, the tiny crack on the left side of the heart, the delicate chain, I knew it instantly. That necklace had belonged to my sister, Margaret, the same sister who vanished without a trace 35 years ago. I froze. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fear. The laughter of my daughter Emily rang through the room, so young, so innocent, so unaware of the chill that suddenly wrapped itself around my heart. I tried to smile, to act normal, but my hands were trembling. The memories I had buried so deep began to claw their way back to the surface. Where did you get that necklace?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my voice quivered with something darker. Emily looked up from her phone and smiled, brushing the pendant with her fingers. "Oh, this? My boyfriend gave it to me, said it used to belong to his family. Isn't it pretty?" I nodded, though my stomach twisted painfully. His family? That wasn't possible. That necklace had been Margaret's, my older sister, my protector, my best friend until the day she disappeared. We had searched for months. The police had found her car near the river, her handbag still inside, but no body, no answers. I'd never seen that necklace again. Until now. That night, long after Emily went to bed, I sat alone in the living room. The rain tapped against the window, a steady rhythm that matched the beating of my heart. I turned the old family album open on my lap-yellowed pages, fading smiles, and the frozen faces of people I once loved. There she was, Margaret, wearing that same necklace on her 23rd birthday, the silver pendant catching the sunlight. I traced the photo with my fingertips, tears blurring my vision. How could it be the same one? And if it was, what did it mean? For days, I couldn't shake the thought. I wanted to ask more, to dig deeper, but I didn't want to scare Emily. She had no idea about Margaret. I'd hidden that chapter of my life. The pain was too much to speak of, but now fate had pushed it right back into my hands. On the 4th day, I decided to meet Emily's boyfriend, Daniel. He came over for dinner, polite, charming, with eyes that seemed to study everything. He brought flowers for me and kissed Emily's hand in that sweet, old-fashioned way that would make any mother's heart soften, but not mine. Not that night. I couldn't stop staring at the necklace glinting around Emily's neck, couldn't stop thinking about the shadow of my sister behind it. During dessert, I finally asked, "Daniel, that necklace you gave Emily, you said it belonged to your family?" He smiled. "Yes, ma'am. My grandmother passed it down to my mother, and she wanted me to give it to someone special." "Your grandmother?" I asked, my voice tightening. "What was her name?" He hesitated just for a fraction of a second, but I caught it. "Margaret," he said finally. "Margaret Lewis." The world seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. My sister's name was Margaret Lewis before she married. I forced a weak smile. "That's a beautiful coincidence." But inside, everything shattered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every word, every look. Margaret Lewis his grandmother? No. My sister never had children. She disappeared before she ever had the chance. Unless she hadn't died. Unless she'd lived. Somewhere, somehow. And now her grandson was sitting in my house. The thought was too wild to believe, but it gnawed at me, refusing to let go. I spent the next few days in a daze, rummaging through old boxes, police reports, news clippings. Her case file had long been closed, labeled presumed deceased, but I had never really believed it. Margaret was too strong, too smart. If she had wanted to vanish, maybe she could have. Then came the next sign. While cleaning the attic one morning, I found an old letter wedged inside a dusty jewelry box. It was sealed but unmarked. The paper was brittle, the ink faint. My hands shook as I opened it. If you ever find this, please forgive me. My heart stopped. It was Margaret's handwriting. I could recognize it anywhere. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, but I had no choice. If you love me, don't come looking. The rest was smudged by time and tears, but the signature at the bottom was clear, Margaret. I sat on the attic floor, the letter trembling in my hands. After all these years, a message from the dead or the missing. I didn't know which anymore. That evening, I asked Emily quietly, "What do you know about Daniel's grandmother?" She smiled. "Not much. She passed away years ago. Daniel doesn't talk about her often. I think it's still painful for him. I wanted to ask where she was buried, but I bit my tongue. I couldn't reveal my suspicions, not yet. I needed proof, so I did something I never thought I'd do again. I went back to the police. The young officer barely looked up from his computer when I explained who I was. He said all old cases were digitized now, and he could pull up my sister's file. When he handed me the tablet, I almost dropped it. There was Margaret's photo, smiling like she used to, but beneath it a note. Unconfirmed report. Subject possibly cited in 1994 under alias M. Lewis. The location, another city, 300 miles away. How had they never told me? I demanded details, but the officer said the report was dismissed for lack of evidence. My heart sank. Still, that one line was enough to ignite something in me, a burning need to know the truth. That night, I sat by the window, staring into the rain again, clutching that letter. I whispered into the darkness, "Margaret, are you alive?" And somewhere deep inside me, I felt it a faint, chilling certainty that she was. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that words can't describe. The sunlight streamed weakly through the curtains, but it felt cold, like the light itself carried secrets I wasn't meant to uncover. I sat at the edge of my bed for a long while, Margaret's letter lying open on my lap. I'd read it at least 20 times through the night, each time hoping a new meaning would reveal itself. But the same words stared back at me. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, but I had no choice. No choice for what? To vanish? To abandon us? Or to escape something darker? That thought haunted me all day. When Emily left for work, I found myself standing at her dressing table, staring at the necklace again. My reflection looked pale, almost ghost-like, and I couldn't shake the eerie feeling that Margaret was somehow looking back at me from the silver heart. I needed to know where it came from, truly. So I did what any desperate mother would do. I waited until Emily went out again that evening. Then I carefully removed the necklace from her jewelry stand and examined every detail. It wasn't an imitation. It was the one, even the tiny scratch on the back, shaped like a crescent moon, was still there. I remember that scratch vividly. It happened when Margaret dropped it during one of our childhood fights. I had teased her, saying the pendant was cursed. She'd laughed and said, "Maybe it is, but it'll always find its way back home." And now, here it was home again. After all these years, I traced the delicate chain and flipped the pendant over. Something glimmered faintly on the inside, tiny engraved letters I had never noticed before. M and R. My breath hitched. M and R. I whispered. Margaret and Robert. Of course, her fiancé. The man she was supposed to marry before she disappeared. Robert Hughes. The charming stranger who had appeared in our lives like a whirlwind, handsome, confident, secretive. I'd been 16 then, too young to understand the look in his eyes when he spoke to her. But even back then, something about him had unsettled me. He'd worked in sales, or so he claimed, though no one really knew what kind. Margaret had fallen head over heels for him. Our parents had their doubts, but Margaret never listened. Then, 1 week before the wedding, she vanished. Robert claimed she'd left him. The police questioned him endlessly, but there was never enough to prove anything. And then he disappeared too. Some said he left the country. Others whispered darker things. I'd spent decades trying to forget that name. Now it was back carved into the metal I held in my trembling hands. That night, when Emily came home, I asked her gently, "Daniel's father, what does he do?" She shrugged. "I think he works in property or something." "Why? And his grandfather? Daniel's grandmother's husband?" She frowned. "I don't think he ever knew him. His grandmother raised his mom alone." A shiver ran down my spine. Alone. Just like Margaret would have been if she'd escaped from something terrible. I barely slept that night. My mind spun in endless circles, each memory connecting to another like threads of a web. I needed to find out more about Daniel's family, where they came from, who they were. So, the next morning, I made up my mind to visit the town mentioned in the police report, the one where she was possibly sighted in 1994. It took me 3 hours by train. The small town looked peaceful, almost eerily so. I carried only her letter, a photo, and the necklace. I went straight to the town records office, pretending to be an old friend searching for a missing relative. The clerk, a kind old man, agreed to help me. After an hour of sifting through the archives, he found something, a marriage certificate, dated 1986. The names: Margaret Lewis and Robert Hughes. My hands went cold. The date was 1 year after she disappeared. She'd married him. She'd actually married Robert. But why would she send me a letter saying, "Don't come looking"? The man noticed my shock and asked if I was all right. I nodded weakly and asked if there were any other records, birth certificates, property listings, anything. He flipped through more files and stopped again. They had one child, he said softly, pointing to the page. A daughter born 1988. Name, Rebecca Hughes. Rebecca. My niece. A niece I never knew existed. I copied the details and thanked him, my mind spinning. If Rebecca was born in 1988, she'd be around Daniel's mother's age now. My heart pounded. Could it be? Was Daniel's mother? Rebecca? When I got home that night, Emily was out again, probably with Daniel. I sat by the window, staring into the darkness, my hands clutching the necklace. The pattern was becoming clear. Margaret hadn't died. She'd lived under another name, raised a family, and kept her secret buried. But why? What had she been running from? The next evening, when Daniel visited again, I studied him more closely. His features, the eyes, the shape of his mouth, something about them stirred a memory I couldn't quite reach. After dinner, when Emily stepped out to take a call, I said quietly, "Daniel, may I ask about your grandmother, Margaret Lewis? Do you know anything about her life?" He hesitated, as if unsure whether to answer. "Not much," he said finally. "My mom said she was a wonderful woman, but very private. She passed away before I was born. We don't have many photos." "Do you know where she lived?" "In a small town by the river," he said thoughtfully. "I think my mom mentioned that once." My heart stopped. The river. The same river where Margaret's car was found all those years ago. I forced a smile, hiding my trembling hands. "What a coincidence. That's where I grew up." He looked surprised. "Really?" "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Really." That night, I cried for the first time in years, not just from sorrow, but from confusion. How could my sister vanish, start a new life, marry the same man who might have been her danger and never once look back? I thought of her laughter, her warmth, the way she used to tuck my hair behind my ear when I was a child. What could have made her abandon everything, even me? I stared at the necklace until my eyes burned, and for a fleeting second, I could almost hear her voice again. "If you love me, don't come looking." But it was too late. I was already looking, and I wasn't going to stop. The next morning, I woke up with a decision carved into my heart. I needed to meet Daniel's mother. If she truly was Margaret's daughter, then somewhere in her home, in her memories, there had to be proof. I couldn't rest until I saw it with my own eyes. Emily thought I was just being a nosy mother, but I smiled and played along when she mentioned Daniel's mom had invited her and me for Sunday lunch. She said Daniel's mother, Rebecca, was excited to meet the woman who raised such a wonderful daughter. I laughed softly at that, though inside I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. She had no idea how close I'd been to her mother, closer than anyone. That Sunday, I dressed carefully, choosing a simple blue shawl, the one Margaret had given me decades ago. It felt right to wear it like a silent shield between past and present. As Emily drove, I kept glancing at the passing fields, my chest tightening with every mile. I couldn't shake the feeling that something immense was waiting for me, something I wasn't ready to face. When we arrived, the house took my breath away. It wasn't large, but it was full of warmth, white walls, ivy creeping up the sides, a wind chime at the door that sang softly when we entered. Rebecca greeted us with a gentle smile. She was graceful, with soft brown hair streaked with gray and kind, watchful eyes. But when she shook my hand, something strange happened. A shiver ran through me, a whisper of familiarity. Her eyes, they were Margaret's. "Please come in," she said warmly. "Daniel's told me so much about you." Her voice. My knees almost gave way. It wasn't the same as Margaret's, but there was an echo, a tone, a rhythm. It made my pulse race. We sat in her cozy dining room. Photos lined the walls, Daniel, as a baby, as a schoolboy, with his mother smiling behind him. I looked at each frame like a detective, searching for evidence, for a ghost, and then I saw it on the mantel, half hidden behind a vase of flowers, a black and white photograph. 2 young women standing by a river, one holding a bouquet, both smiling. My heart stopped. I knew that photo. I took that photo. It was from Margaret's engagement day, the last day I saw her alive. I couldn't breathe. "That picture?" I whispered. "Where did you get that?" Rebecca turned, surprised. "Oh, that? It belonged to my mother. It's one of the few things I have from her youth. Do you know it?" I stared at her, my lips trembling. "I took that picture," I said quietly. Her smile faltered. "You took it?" "Yes. The woman next to your mother, that's me." The air in the room shifted. She blinked, confusion clouding her face. "I think there must be some mistake." "No mistake," I said, my voice shaking. "Your mother's name was Margaret Lewis. She was my sister." Silence. Daniel looked from me to his mother, bewildered. Emily's fork froze mid-air. Rebecca's hands began to tremble. "That can't be," she whispered. "My mother never had any family. She said she was orphaned young." I felt my eyes sting. She wasn't an orphan. She had me. She had us. Rebecca's face went pale. Then, why would she lie? I didn't have an answer. My heart broke for her confusion and mine. I reached into my bag and pulled out the letter. She left this for me. I found it just days ago. Rebecca took it with shaking hands. As she read, tears filled her eyes. This is her handwriting," she whispered. "I remember watching her write grocery lists. The way she curled her M's. This is hers." Daniel stood quietly behind her, his jaw tight. "Mom, what does this mean?" Rebecca pressed a hand to her mouth. "It means everything I knew about my mother might have been a lie." She excused herself and went upstairs, the letter clutched tightly in her fist. I sat there frozen, the room thick with tension. Emily looked at me, confused and frightened. Daniel followed his mother, leaving us in the heavy silence. Minutes passed, maybe hours. I lost track. When Rebecca came back down, her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "There's something you need to see," she said. She led us to her mother's old chest, an antique wooden box with iron corners. "I've never opened this," she admitted. "It was locked. But when I found the letter, I searched her drawer and found this key." The click of the lock echoed through the quiet room. Inside were neatly folded clothes, faded photographs, and a smaller envelope. Rebecca opened it carefully. Inside were documents, an old passport, a wedding certificate, and another letter. She read aloud. To my daughter Rebecca, if one day you ever learn the truth, know that I loved you with every breath I had. I left my home not because I wanted to, but because I had to protect you. Some secrets cannot be buried without blood." Her voice cracked. I reached out, touching her hand. "Protect her from who, Margaret?" I whispered. Rebecca handed me the letter. At the bottom, scrawled faintly, was a name I hadn't seen in decades. Robert Hughes. My blood ran cold. "He was her husband," I said. "Your father?" Rebecca shook her head. "No. My mother told me he died before I was born. I looked closer at the documents, the passport, the dates. Something didn't fit. No," I said slowly. "He didn't die before you were born. He disappeared the same day she did. Maybe she was running from him." Rebecca's lip trembled. "You think she was in danger?" "I think she found something out, something that made her flee," I said softly. "Maybe he wasn't who she thought he was." Daniel spoke for the first time, his voice low. "But if she was hiding, why pass down the necklace? Why give it to my mom?" I looked at him sadly. "Because she wanted it to find its way back home." The room fell silent. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. I could almost feel Margaret's presence there with us, not angry, not sorrowful, but watching, waiting. Rebecca wiped her tears and said quietly, "There's one more thing. When I was a child, my mother used to tell me a bedtime story about two sisters who loved each other so much that even death couldn't separate them. She said that one day the younger sister would find her again, guided by something small and shining." Her voice broke completely. I never understood what she meant until now. I couldn't hold back anymore. I took her in my arms, and for the first time in decades, I felt like I had a piece of Margaret again. But as I held her, a thought crept into my mind, cold and certain. If Margaret had been running from Robert, then maybe he hadn't vanished at all. Maybe he was still out there, somewhere, hidden among the pieces of the past that were finally beginning to surface. I couldn't sleep that night. The letter, the photograph, the necklace, they haunted me like ghosts, whispering in the dark. I sat awake in the guest room at Rebecca's house, staring out the window at the moonlight trembling on the glass. Somewhere in the distance, an owl cried, and the sound made my skin prickle. It felt like Margaret was trying to tell me something, like she was close, but just out of reach. Rebecca had gone to bed, exhausted from the emotional storm. Emily was asleep in the next room, her innocence untouched by the weight of what we had uncovered. But I couldn't rest. I kept thinking about Robert Hughes. Every instinct told me that he was the key to all of this. The next morning, I asked Rebecca if she had anything else of her mother's, anything that might connect us to him. She led me to the attic. It smelled of dust and old memories. Boxes upon boxes stacked neatly, each labeled in Margaret's precise handwriting. Winter clothes, books, baby things, documents. We opened one marked letters. Inside were envelopes bound together with a faded red ribbon. They were all addressed to M.L., Margaret's initials. The return address made my stomach twist. R. Hughes, 22 Berkeley Street. Rebecca looked confused. "That's here in this town," That's where we used to live before this house. I carefully untied the ribbon. The letters were written in Robert's hand, neat, firm, yet desperate. The first one began, "My dearest Margaret, I know what you saw, but you must understand I did what I had to. You and the baby mean everything to me. I can fix this. Please, don't leave me." My pulse quickened. The next letter was even more chilling. "They're asking questions. If you talk to anyone, they'll come after us both. You don't know what they're capable of. And then the last one, if you take the child and run, I'll find you. You can't hide forever, Margaret. You're mine." Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God! I could barely breathe. He wasn't protecting her. She was protecting you. We sat in silence, the weight of the truth pressing down on us, the realization that my sister had lived in fear, running from the man she once loved, broke something deep inside me. Rebecca whispered, "There's something else." A few months before she died, my mother received a phone call. I was little, but I remember her face turning white. She packed our bags that night and said we were moving again. I thought she was just restless, but maybe she was still hiding. "Did she ever mention what happened to him?" I asked. "No," Rebecca said softly. "Just that some nightmares never die." The words chilled me. That afternoon I convinced Rebecca to visit the old address, 22 Berkeley Street. The house was still standing, though time had worn it down. The windows were boarded, the paint flaking, ivy strangling the porch. A for sale sign leaned crookedly in the yard. We pushed open the rusted gate and walked to the front door. It creaked when I touched it. I felt a strange pull, like Margaret's memory was woven into the walls. Rebecca hesitated. "Do you really think we'll find anything here?" "I don't know," I said quietly. But she left breadcrumbs for a reason. Inside, the air was thick with dust. The rooms were empty, but faint outlines of furniture marked where life once existed. Rebecca walked slowly, running her fingers along the faded wallpaper. "This was the kitchen," she whispered. "She used to hum while she cooked. I can almost hear her. We searched every corner, nothing until we reached the basement. The stairs groaned under our weight as we descended. The smell of damp wood and rust filled the air. There was a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, its light dim and flickering. In the corner, half buried under debris, I saw a small metal box. My heart pounded as I wiped the dust away. Inside were old photographs, newspaper clippings, and a cassette tape labeled simply, "For When It's Safe." Rebecca stared at it. "That's her handwriting." I turned the tape over in my hands, trembling. "Do you still have a cassette player?" We brought it back to her house and set it carefully in an old player Daniel found in the storage room. When we pressed play, the sound of static filled the room. Then, faintly, her voice, Margaret's voice. "Rebecca, my sweet girl, if you're hearing this, it means I couldn't keep running." Rebecca gasped. I clutched her hand. Margaret's voice continued, trembling but steady. "I tried to protect you from the truth. Your father wasn't who he said he was. He was involved with dangerous people, money laundering, threats, even worse. I found evidence, and that's when everything changed. He wanted me Silent. He said if I didn't disappear, I'd never see you again. The tape crackled, her breath catching between words. So I ran. I changed my name. I built a new life. But if he finds me, if he ever finds you, promise me you'll go to the police. There's a folder under the floorboard in the basement. It has everything they need to know. Then silence. Rebecca covered her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. She was terrified, she whispered. All these years, I felt frozen. The folder, she said under the floorboard. Daniel didn't waste a second. He grabbed a flashlight and the three of us drove back to the old house. The sun had already dipped below the horizon. The street bathed in that eerie blue light that makes everything look half dream, half memory. We found the loose floorboard exactly where the tape hinted near the basement steps. Beneath it, wrapped in a plastic sheet, was a folder full of documents. Forged passports, bank statements, letters from anonymous names, and photographs of Robert with men in dark suits, exchanging envelopes. Rebecca flipped through them, her hands shaking. He wasn't just a criminal. He was dangerous. I nodded, my throat dry. And she lived every day, looking over her shoulder because of him. Daniel looked pale. What if he's still alive? The question lingered in the air like smoke. The thought of that man, older now, maybe hidden under another name, made my skin crawl. As we drove home, the weight of everything settled on me. I looked at the necklace resting against Emily's chest in the rearview mirror, gleaming faintly under the streetlights. It was more than jewelry now. It was a thread connecting generations, Margaret, Rebecca, Emily, all tied by secrets buried too deep. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered to the darkness, I found her, Margaret. I found your daughter, but what do I do now? And in that silence, the answer seemed to echo faintly in my mind, finish what I couldn't. I didn't tell Emily everything. How could I? She wouldn't have believed that her necklace, her boyfriend's heirloom, was evidence of a family curse stitched together by lies, fear, and blood. But I could no longer pretend this was just about the past. It was bleeding into the present, crawling into my daughter's life like a shadow I couldn't stop. Rebecca and I went to the police the next morning. The detective listened politely at first, his pen tapping against the table as we spoke. But when I handed him the documents and the cassette, his face changed. He recognized the names, the accounts, the shell companies. These are tied to an unsolved investigation from the 82nds, he said quietly. We thought everyone involved was dead. Everyone except Robert Hughes, I murmured. He nodded grimly. If he's alive, he's been in hiding for decades. We'll reopen the file. It should have felt like relief, but instead I felt only dread, because I knew, deep down, that something had already been set in motion. When you dig up the past digs back. That evening, Emily came home from work, humming softly as she walked in. She was glowing, her face bright, her laugh effortless. I tried to smile, but my mind was elsewhere. How's Daniel? I asked carefully. Oh, he's fine, she said, setting her bag down. Though he's been a little distracted lately. Something about his mom acting strange. My heart stopped. Strange how? She's been on edge, Emily said with a shrug. He said she keeps getting weird calls and doesn't answer them. He thinks it's just stress. I felt the blood drain from my face. Rebecca hadn't told me anything about phone calls. I immediately called her, but she didn't answer. I tried again and again, nothing. That night, I barely slept. I kept staring at my phone, waiting for it to ring. Around 2 a.m. It finally did, but it wasn't Rebecca. It was Daniel. His voice was trembling. "Mrs. Turner, I don't know what's going on. Mom's gone." My heart seized. "What do you mean she's gone?" "She left the house an hour ago. Said she needed to clear her head, but she left her phone behind. The front door was wide open." Panic surged through me. "Daniel, listen to me. Stay home. Lock the doors. Don't go anywhere until I get there." I woke Emily and told her to stay put, then drove through the empty streets like a woman possessed. The night was black and heavy with mist, the headlights cutting through it like pale knives. When I reached Rebecca's house, Daniel was standing on the porch, pale as a ghost. "She didn't take the car," he whispered. "Her purse is still here." We searched the house, every room, every corner, and then I saw it. The back door latch had been broken. Outside, in the soft mud, there were footprints leading toward the woods behind the property. My pulse thundered in my ears. We followed them with flashlights, the beams trembling with every step. The woods were silent, except for the crunch of leaves underfoot. And then from somewhere ahead came a faint sound like a branch snapping. "Rebecca!" I shouted. My voice echoed through the darkness. No answer. When we reached the clearing, I saw her standing near the edge of the river, her figure small and still. Relief washed over me, but only for a moment, because she wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, tall, gray-haired, but his posture was rigid, familiar. He turned slightly at the sound of our footsteps, and when the flashlight hit his face, I felt my stomach drop. Robert Hughes. Older, yes, his features carved by time but unmistakable. The same sharp jaw, the same cold eyes I remembered from my youth. Rebecca's voice trembled. "He said he just wanted to talk. He said he wanted to make peace." Robert's gaze fixed on me. "You must be Margaret's sister," he said softly. His voice carried that same charm that used to fool everyone. "You've aged, but the eyes are the same." My hands shook. "You're supposed to be dead." He smiled thinly. "People like me don't die that easily. What do you want?" I demanded. He sighed. "Closure. I've lived in exile for decades because of your sister's betrayal. She took everything from me, my name, my life. I just wanted my family back." "Family?" I spat. "You threatened her. You destroyed her." "She misunderstood," he said calmly. "I was trying to protect her. The people I worked for, they don't forgive easily. She found something she shouldn't have. I begged her to stay quiet, but she ran. And now all of you are dragging the past back up again." Daniel stepped forward, his voice breaking. "You're my grandfather?" Robert looked at him, and for a moment something almost human flickered in his eyes. "You have her eyes," he murmured. "Margaret's eyes." Then, just as quickly, the softness vanished. "You shouldn't have come here," he said coldly. I saw it then, the faint glint of metal in his coat pocket. My breath caught. "Robert, don't do this." But before he could move, flashing lights cut through the trees' police sirens. The detective had tracked my location from the earlier call. Robert turned toward the sound, fury twisting his face. "You should have stayed out of this," he hissed. Rebecca screamed as he lunged toward her, but Daniel was faster. He grabbed his arm, struggling as the gun clattered to the ground. The officers stormed in seconds later, shouting commands. "Drop it! On the ground!" Robert froze, his eyes burning with something unholy: regret, rage, maybe both. Then, slowly, he raised his hands. When they led him away, I felt the strength leave my body. I sank to my knees beside Rebecca, holding her as she sobbed uncontrollably. The night air was cold, but I could feel Margaret's presence all around us, her relief, her sorrow, her love. By dawn, it was over. Robert was in custody. The truth had finally crawled into the light, ugly and raw, but real. Rebecca leaned on my shoulder as the sun rose over the river. "She was right," she whispered. "She couldn't keep running forever." I nodded, staring at the soft gold light spilling over the water. "But she kept us alive. That's what matters." Daniel walked toward us, holding the necklace in his hand. The chain gleamed faintly in the morning sun. "You should have this," he said softly, placing it in my palm. I looked down at it, tears welling in my eyes. The same heart-shaped pendant that had started it all, the silent witness to love, fear, and secrets that refused to stay buried. I closed my hand around it, whispering, "You found your way home, Margaret, just like you said you would." But deep down, I knew one final truth still waited to be uncovered, something Margaret hadn't told any of us. Because sometimes, even when justice is served, the dead still hold their silence, and that silence was about to break. The days after Robert's arrest passed in a blur of questions, reports, and sleepless nights. The police interrogated him for hours, uncovering fragments of his crimes, old laundering networks, missing money, falsified identities. He denied everything, of course, claiming Margaret had twisted the story. But the evidence from the folder, the recordings, and his own letters were undeniable. Rebecca and I sat through it all, side by side, gripping each other's hands like survivors of the same storm. I kept thinking about Margaret, how she must have lived for years, constantly looking over her shoulder, terrified that the man she once loved would one day find her. She hadn't lived, she had survived, and somehow, even after her death, she was still protecting us. On the third day, the detective called me into his office. His tone was different, quieter, almost hesitant. "Mrs. Turner," he began, "we found something during the search of Mr. Hughes's storage unit." He handed me a small sealed evidence bag. Inside was a faded envelope, my name scrawled across it in Margaret's handwriting. My throat closed. "Where did you find this?" "It was hidden in a book, one of dozens of her belongings he kept. It seems he never knew it was there." I sat there, frozen, my heart pounding. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter and a small photograph, the two of us as children, sitting by the river, smiling at the camera. On the back, in her looping script, she'd written, "No matter how far we run, love will find us again." Tears blurred my vision as I unfolded the letter. "My dearest sister, if this ever reaches you, It means I couldn't keep my promise to stay hidden. I want you to know I never stopped loving you. I left not because I didn't care, but because the truth would have destroyed you, too. Robert was never the man we thought he was. When I found out what he'd done, what he was planning, I couldn't bear to let you get caught in it. He wasn't just running from the law. He was running from something worse. There are people who would never allow the truth to come out. So I took his files, the proof of everything, and ran. They came after me, but I had help a man named Henry. He got us out, changed our names. He's the reason Rebecca had a chance at a normal life. Tell her I'm sorry I lied to her, and tell her I loved her more than my own life. And tell Emily, though she'll never meet me, that I'm proud of her for carrying my necklace. I knew one day it would lead you home. Forgive me for the years you spent wondering. Some stories can only be told after the danger is gone. Love, Margaret. By the time I reached the end, I was sobbing. Every word carried the weight of decades of fear, sacrifice, and love so fierce it defied death. When I showed Rebecca the letter, she cried silently, her tears soaking into my shoulder. "She saved us both," she whispered, "even after all this time." Later that week, we held a small memorial for Margaret by the river, the same place her car was found all those years ago. The police believed she had died in a boating accident years after she disappeared, though no body was ever recovered. But for us, this was enough. Closure didn't always come with graves. Sometimes it came with the truth finally being spoken aloud. Emily stood beside me, her hand gently squeezing mine. "Mom," she said softly, "I didn't know Aunt Margaret's story was so tragic." I nodded. She carried her pain in silence so we could live free of it. That was her gift. Rebecca placed the necklace, the heart-shaped pendant, on a small white stone near the water's edge. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose, and the pendant caught the light one last time. It shimmered like a heartbeat before sinking beneath the ripples. Daniel placed a white rose beside it. "She's at peace now," he said quietly. But as we stood there, something strange happened. The wind stirred, gentle but certain, brushing against my cheek like a familiar touch. And for a fleeting second, I heard it Margaret's laugh, faint and soft, carried by the breeze. I closed my eyes and smiled through my tears. "I hear you, Margaret," I whispered. "You can rest now." Afterward, life slowly began to settle. Rebecca moved closer to us, finding comfort in family she never knew she had. Daniel and Emily grew closer, though we all silently agreed that the past would not define them. The investigation closed within months. Robert pleaded guilty, and the network of men he'd worked with decades ago were long gone ghosts of a forgotten crime. But every so often, when the nights grew quiet, I'd find myself sitting by the window, staring at the stars, thinking about my sister. I'd imagine her in another life, one where she never had to run, where we grew old together, sitting side by side on the porch, laughing about nothing. I'd imagine her hands in mine, warm and steady, no secrets between us. And then, one evening, something unexpected happened. A small parcel arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a small velvet box. When I opened it, my heart stopped. Inside was the necklace, the very same one we'd left by the river, untouched, whole, gleaming. My fingers trembled as I lifted it. The clasp was broken, as if it had been torn free, but the pendant still bore the engraving, M and R. Only now, beneath it, faintly etched, were two new letters, E and D, Emily and Daniel. I stared at it for a long time. My breath caught somewhere between disbelief and wonder. There was no note, no explanation, just that pendant returned, renewed. Emily walked in then, seeing it in my hand. "Mom," she whispered, "where did you get that?" I looked at her, tears in my eyes. "I think it found its way back, just like she said it would." I fastened it around her neck once more, watching as it caught the evening light. It didn't feel cursed anymore. It felt like a promise, a bridge between what was lost and what had finally been found. As she smiled, the light reflected in her eyes the same soft glimmer Margaret once had. And in that moment, I knew the story wasn't about loss at all. It was about return, about love refusing to die. And as I stood there, holding Emily close, I could almost hear Margaret's voice again, gentle, steady, full of peace. "You found me, little sister. You brought me home." The wind stirred once more, carrying that warmth through the room. And for the first time in 35 years, I didn't feel haunted. I felt whole.